Hello, everyone. This is sig-aws. I am your moderator, Justin Santa Barbara. It is May 3rd. We have a couple of items on the agenda. Please do add things to the agenda if you would like to get to them. We have a quick discussion of KEPs and I think some discussion of KubeCon. And most excitingly, perhaps to start us off, we have Nadir, who is going to give us a demo of Cluster API on AWS. Right, Nadir?
Yeah, that's right.
Take it away.
So we have literally cut a release in the last hour of version 0.2.1. So those of you not familiar with Cluster API, I'm sure you've heard a lot about it from us over the last couple of months. So what Cluster API briefly is what we consider to be a sort of future model of managing Kubernetes using Kubernetes. We love Kubernetes so much, we'll put Kubernetes in your Kubernetes. So a declarative way to build clusters and then do the ongoing management of it. It's not just for AWS, it's for multiple cloud providers and on-premise. So it's really about giving users like a common interface to sort of manage clusters. In terms of what that looks like, it's a bunch of CRDs, providers for each type of cloud or on-premise, a controller or operator, otherwise known as, that handles things like machine sets, which are analogs for replica sets, and machine deployments, which are analogs for deployments, and CLI tools to bootstrap clusters from the ground up, which is what I'm going to be showing you today. So in terms of, so we've been at it since last August, probably. So we've done a couple of releases. We haven't demoed to sig-aws for quite a while. One of the things is if you go to GitHub, you can now download releases and it gives you almost everything you need to actually start a cluster. We added support for HA control planes. So you can build a multi-node control plane out of the box now. We support Kubernetes 1.13 and 1.14. And in the last release, we've done quite a lot of work on reliability, so improving the reconciliation. And that's really great to have contributions from others like New Relic and Scale Factory, who've really sort of improved the reliability last couple of months. So I have personally not worked on Cluster API AWS for a while, so I was able to get a cluster up and running in the last half an hour. So we're going to do that again. So I get out there. So I have downloaded the release artifacts from GitHub. So 0.2.1 will be out soon, but the things that you need are a tar file, which gives you some YAML in the script, cluster AWS ADM, which does some bootstrapping tasks which are specific to AWS. So specifically, this is about deploying a CloudFormation template that sets up IAM roles. Because what we really wanted to do is make sure that it's absolute least permissions in terms of how we build a cluster. And we also do some stuff where we have to get your credentials into a bootstrap cluster, which I'll show you in a bit. And right now, there's a utility called Cluster Cuttle, which every provider has their own one that you need to bootstrap a cluster for that provider. And at the end, I'll talk about how we're thinking about changing this in the future. But I'll just show you what we got. So we have the output, the tar file. Once you unzip it, you have a bunch of templates. So cluster, a definition of what a cluster is, and you kind of just give it CIDR blocks for pods and services, rich region, and what SSH key that you're going to use in an emergency to get onto a box. Definitions of what machines are, and this provider component space, which is essentially just a deployment, like you might download for any other bit of software that goes on Kubernetes, and it's the definition of the controllers and the RBAC permissions and the things and the CRD objects that are needed to run cluster API. So given those things, so I've used a tool called AWS Vault. I'm already in there. So what that does, it stores your keys in your keychain or keyring on Linux. So you can just use them securely, supports multiple profiles. So I have a bunch of credentials in my environment, which I will try not to reveal. And given that, we then do... I should delete these things. It just templates out the YAML templates that we got, and also injects my credentials as a secret. So we need this because normally when you're running AWS-based stuff like COPS, you're running on your laptop in your sort of command line with that environment, so it can resolve your AWS credentials. But what we're going to do here is we actually run a Kubernetes cluster, and we use Kine for this, which is a way of running Kubernetes in Docker. So we actually need to take the secret, we need to take your credentials from your environment and put them as a Kubernetes secret and run them inside this Bootstrap cluster. So we do provide a warning that this provided components.yaml does have some AWS credentials in it. So not going to show you that. I'll show you the other bits. So we have our cluster just templated out. It's just, test one, highly imaginative. It's going to use this SSH key that I've uploaded previously. So actually, another thing that we provide in this artifact, in this tar file, is a getting started guide. It's markdown file. So this goes through the bits and pieces that you need to actually get up and running. We have a definition of a control plane, so that we're going to do a multi-node control plane. We also have a deployment, so we can actually create a bunch of worker nodes and have them managed automatically by Cluster API. And this addons.yaml is here it's just a Calico deployment. So one of the things we want to try and do is be agnostic of CNI. You can choose what type of networking you want to bring to your cluster. It's not the job of Cluster API necessarily to force an opinion on you. So we're going to deploy Calico as part of this deployment. So first of all, I need to run cluster AWS ADM to set up my CloudFormation stack. So made a note of all the stuff I need. So it's run really quickly because I've already it's already instantiated. So this cluster AWS ADM looks at your AWS accounts, creates some IAM policies, templates out a CloudFormation template, and then just runs it. So you can see we provide policies for the controllers that run for Cluster API itself, and we also do ones for the nodes, which are going to be running the AWS cloud provider. So what you would see in any other Kubernetes cluster that's running on AWS, and we create some IAM roles and users that are used to bring up the instances. So I've pretty much ready to start a cluster. So what I'm going to do here is, so this is all in the getting started guide, but I'll just go through some nice smoke and mirrors here. So we're going to use kind as our bootstrap cluster. So it will default to Minikube, but we're going to use kind here. Also going to say, I'll go through what this does in a bit. We have to specify this provider AWS for now. That's just a quirk of cluster cutoff. And then these things are like, we're going to deploy some machines. So I'm going to point at the machines YAML. So I'm going to point at this HA control plane. A cluster definition, I showed earlier, the provider components, which is just the deployment to get cluster API AWS running, and add-ons, which is the Calico. So given that, I'm going to hit this and hopefully it will not break. So right now it's just going to create a kind cluster. It just creates that with the name cluster API. So that will take about 30 seconds before it does anything else. Make that big. Okay, so cluster cutoff has some logs, but one of the UI issues that we have in cluster API is using cluster cutoff on its own. It doesn't tell you a lot about what's actually happening. If you really want the details of what's going on, you actually need to look at the logs on the kind cluster. So I just pointed the kubeconfig at kind, and I'm literally just going to get the logs for that, so we can see that in real time. Except it can't because it's going up. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still waiting for downloads.
This is really nice, Nadia. I really like the way that you have wisely, from my experience, put Calico, for example, into that add-ons thing. I feel like it sort of bounds the problem quite nicely, right? So this is really just about the cluster, and then we can plug into the other efforts elsewhere through that mechanism.
Yeah, ideally. I mean, there are still some Calico bits encoded in the cluster. So for instance, you need certain security group rules to get Calico to work. You need certain ports open. So it should work for other CNIs, but one of the sort of rough edges is that, yeah, we specifically put stuff to get Calico working into the cluster.
Yeah, that is a good point, because I was thinking like every CNI has a different network transport that needs different things opened, and like some of them also like need IAM roles, right? Like AWS VPC CNI, I'm pretty sure needs to like permissions for that.
And the add-ons doesn't really get you all the way there. So one of the things that is happening right now is that we're actually going through a rethink of what cluster API is. So one thing that cluster object I showed earlier is actually what that's actually doing is creating a VPC, subnet, internet gateways, NAT gateways, a load of sort of networking concerns that you might not care about. And you can bring your own VPC, but there's probably a nicer way to give that experience. So right now, if you go to discuss.kubernetes.io and you click, you can, if you sign in, you can turn on dark mode. We have a cluster API tag, and in here we're sort of collecting user stories, thinking about like how we could make the design work for a larger number of people. So we've got different work streams. So one is on node lifecycle management. So how do you bring up a machine and make it part of the cluster and tear it down again? How do you do upgrades, for instance? We have one on a control plane lifecycle. So what are the various ways in which you can build a control plane? data model, which is going back to these cluster and machine objects, about thinking about redesigning those. So each of these is a work stream that has its own meetings. So if you come to this page, this work streams meeting, we've got minutes for all of these areas. So if you're interested in working on Cluster API, now is a really good time to get involved. Cluster APIs falls under SIG cluster lifecycle. So it's a lot wide-ranging effort. It's not just VMware, it's everyone's involved. So if there's something that you haven't had before from other tooling and you want to see made available now, like, come and give us your opinions right now. So given that, let's see where we have got to. So all right, so I'm just pulled up the logs for this cluster. So see it's creating this, it's got through to doing the security groups, and we can see there's some hard-coded Calico stuff right now, IPMP Calico. So what's happening is we have like two loops that go around, one for the cluster, another one for the machines. The machine one keeps retrying and failing because bits of the network aren't there, but that is fine. The standard sort of Kubernetes model, keep retrying until you get to the state that you want to end up in. So yeah, so right now the cluster actuator is just creating a Bastion instance. So if I want to get onto that control plane in case there's an emergency or something's gone wrong, then I can break through onto one small instance and then get through onto the rest of the cluster. So yeah, we deploy the control plane into private subnets as well. So the access to the cluster happens through a load balancer that's also created by this cluster controller, which we call actuators for historical reasons in Cluster API.
How long is it? How much longer are we going to wait? Should we? Because I'm thinking, like, I don't know whether you're filling, or because we could like talk about some other things and come back, or I don't know what's best.
I think now is a good time to probably break and come back.
Okay. I don't know if are there any questions that anyone would like to ask while we're on the subject, and we'll come back to it otherwise.
How does this model translate into like managed control planes, thinking EKS, for example?
Yeah, so right now we don't support EKS. So what we're thinking about in terms of the next version of the cluster API data model is breaking out what a cluster is into separate components. Maybe there'll be sort of separate infrastructure component, and maybe separate the control plane. So right now the control plane is defined as machines, and if the machines have certain labels, then the controllers know that that's a control plane node. But you probably want to create that separately, maybe have a cluster, maybe potentially have a control plane object, and in that you can define what type of control plane that you want, whether that's EKS or one that's built from EC2.
Cool. What about for so while you're going through the creation of this and the bootstrapping, it's using kind locally. Is that just something that's fully configurable? Could you deploy this into another cluster that's actually like a remote cluster and do it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the cluster cutoff workflow is what we call a pivoting workflow. So you start off with a cluster that's running a set of controllers that's running in your kind instance. Once that cluster is created, the objects then move across into the created cluster and the kind cluster is switched off. But actually, most people don't want to run it like that. What they really want is a management cluster. So there's nothing to stop you taking the provider components as is and running that on a cluster. And then you can actually use kubectl, because these are just CRD objects. So you can apply these machines and clusters with kubectl and just let it happen that way. I think that's one of the things that's confusing. We always talk about the cluster cutoff workflow because that's how you get anywhere with cluster API to start off with. But actually, in the majority cases, you're going to probably run a management cluster.
Cool. So this is just CRD. So the cluster cuddle kind of like helps create and templatize the CRs that you're eventually going to be using.
Yeah, there's a bit of sort of like a workflow that it has where it creates a control plane instance and waits for everything to come up and then moves the objects across. You can layer your own tooling around on top of this. You don't have to use cluster cuddle at all.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is great. I don't know. Do you want to check if it's ready, Nadir, or because it sounded like it looked like it may not quite.
Yeah, it's getting there. So we've actually created a control plane instance. So if I go back to my browser, that one, that would be. So I've got control plane 0, have the load balance in place now. And we use classic ELB still because we want to support hairpinning. So yeah, what's happening now is it's applied those provider components to the new cluster. It's just going to wait for that to come up and then tear down the rest of the kind. So, but what I can do now is so what's happened is cluster cuddle's dropped a kube config, which I won't show because then someone might use it. And I should be able to see part of the cluster up. Oh, no, it's not quite there yet. Oh, well, okay. Maybe we should come back in a minute.
Yeah, let's come back in a little bit, actually, because you've nicely teed up the next item on the agenda, which is another item I put on, which is talking about, you want to stop sharing your screen to do, or, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Which is an item about our KEPs. We have one significant KEP that is, one KEP that's going in to the next release, which is from Moonfish. I don't know if you prefer to go to by Moonfish or not, but Moonfish. Yang, Moonfish. But it's around, do you want to tell us what it's about? And then we can, the thing I really wanted to discuss was I think the promotion is great, and thank you so much. I think the previous limitations of NLB and whether they have been addressed around hairpinning, for example. So.
Yeah, I have proposed to graduate the NLB from alpha to beta in 1.15 because the feature has already been stabilized since it's alpha and has been staying alpha for more than about 5 versions. And also it has now have multiple bug fixes and support core zone load balancing and has support TLS termination at front end or either at back end. It can be switchable. And I think Chris, we are going to add in the UDP support, so we should be fine for the graduate to beta.
That's wonderful. Yes, and then I think the thing I wanted to bring up was the idea that in a future release that we would effectively move the default from NLB or from ELB Classic to NLB. And I think the two limitations that I'm aware of are the two historical limitations that I was aware of, and I don't know whether they're still true, and maybe you can educate me, is around the zonal behavior. Like it seemed like previously you had to create 3 IPs, 1 in each zone, and it wasn't clear what happened when one of those 3 zones failed. And then, as Nadir just mentioned, the hairpinning behavior. I don't know if you're familiar with either of those, or the lack of hairpinning. I don't know if you're familiar with either of those limitations and whether they have been addressed.
I don't think the NLB has issue from hairpin because it's using the DNS instead of IPs for the node balancer. I mean, because I know the core proxy did something to translate the service IP reported by node balancer into cluster local IP or something like that.
Okay. I guess, well, why don't we follow up on that later as a requirement for figuring it out whether we're able to promote it, so we can open an issue,
Yeah,
Nadir.
I don't think the NLB support will suffer from the hairpin issue. I'll follow up on that.
Okay. Well, we can surface that, and I don't know whether do you know whether the zonal? It sounds like there's new cross zone behavior. Do you know if that addresses like some of the challenges around multiple elastic IPs? I guess.
Because NLB is already support cross node balancing, so it can send traffic to other zones as well. So it doesn't have such problem.
Okay. And well, I think why don't I open an issue on whether we can open an issue to discuss those two issues, and then we can close them out hopefully, and then that will be a good discussion point for everyone, so we don't have to keep talking about it, as it were. But I think it'd be great, and we also have to figure out how the right mechanism for updating people that have existing services of type load balancer.
Yeah, the schedule can still be, discussed and can be changed based on it. And yeah, it's just a proposal, but we definitely should sometime move from CLB to the NLB.
Okay. And the alpha to beta thing is what was formally approved, I guess. So that it's wonderful to see that moving forward. So I think that's a great idea.
Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for doing the work on that. And then I think we have one other item on the agenda, which is from Chris.
Yeah, so this came out this morning. So Ilya started a thread on Discuss about trying to get people together, do like a birds of feather around EKS, COPS, anything related to AWS, app mesh, so on and so forth. I dropped a link in the invite. If you're interested, put a note on there as well. I dropped another link at the bottom on my comment on there. AWS is throwing a free event on Monday that if you're interested, you can come and join. A bunch of us will be there talking about different things on AWS.
That's awesome. I will be in Barcelona. I will check my calendar as to the event. And yeah, that sounds wonderful. Thank you, Chris. I don't know if other people are going, but yeah, it should be fun. Nadir, how are we looking on our cluster?
Yeah, so I have probably screwed myself.
I think what we saw was really cool. Like we saw the flow, and you want to tell us what we would have seen from that?
Yeah. So
we don't have to show the actual screen, but we can talk about what the remaining steps were.
I basically had it. It didn't attach my NAT gateway because I had one of the same name that was recently deleted. So I don't have networking on my box to bootstrap.
It's still early, and it only was released this morning, so that's all right. And but we had an API server come up, we had a control plane come up, and it was trying to apply add-ons, and it was going to then create nodes, right, using the machine.
Yes. Well, it was going to create another control plane node and then join them. So we have a HA control plane.
Oh wow, you were trying to do HA. Okay, that would have been cool. Maybe we'll 0.3 we'll try again.
Yeah. So we've done improvements around reconciliation, but obviously there's still work to be done there.
But that's very cool. And but the nodes are then managed by that HA control plane. The HA control plane spins up, and then it spins up nodes. Is that the sequence?
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. That's awesome. Thank you for the demo. I sorry didn't get all the way through, but yeah, what we saw was pretty awesome. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or comments or any more issues for our meeting.
Since Justin, you are here, I have a quick question about this class of API as well as installing the add-ons. I'm wondering how are we going to move forward on this class API and installing those add-ons, like the add-on operator, and how is it going to work?
Yeah, I mean, we have so there is a sub-project of sig cluster lifecycle looking at using operators or other technologies like it to better manage add-ons. It feels like if you're talking about that work is still in early days. We have some that happens in the sig cluster lifecycle, which is Tuesday at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern, or I don't know your local time zone, but 9 Pacific. But in the alternate weeks from sig cluster lifecycle itself, and still early, but I would imagine that the way it would integrate with Cluster API is you would create, in that addons.yaml, you would create the operator and you would create a CRD to describe what you wanted to install. So in this case, you would install the Calico operator and you would specify a Calico CRD. Presumably you'd also have to specify the definition of the CRD itself, or the CR itself as well. And then the operator would come up and install Calico and let you manage and upgrade that. I don't think it would address the issue Nadir rightly raised on how you manage, in the case of Calico, the IP permissions, or in the case of VPC, sorry, the network permissions, or in the case of VPC CNI, the IAM permissions. We have to figure out how to bridge. Like that is sort of like a layering violation, right? Like we have to figure out how to get from these add-ons up into the thing that is controlling like cluster API or your cluster installation tool. So the separation is not entirely clean, but for simple add-ons like Dashboard or kubeproxy or Core DNS, it should be a clean separation.
Makes sense. But I would assume like for the front end, like end user experience, are we gonna still use the kubectl or any other tools to bootstrap the whole experience, including add-on, master node, worker node altogether? It's gonna be a separate tool just for the add-on.
The add-ons shouldn't be a separate tool, I think. I think the idea of add-ons is that, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I feel like we're all pretty agreed that we want a declarative way of managing, or a declarative way of managing add-ons in Kubernetes. So via kubectl or whatever you want makes sense. I think, or makes more sense than the current approach, which is, well, in kubeup, it's a bash script which reads from directories. In kops, the add-ons are sort of baked into the kops binary. I like what clusterctl has done, where it's a sort of external file. It sounds like it's still shipped with the release, so something there. But yeah, I think so. If that, anyone want to comment, or anyone else have any views? Yeah. Does that?
Yeah, cool. That is really useful. The reason I'm bringing it up is because I'm mainly working on the CSI drivers, because we're gonna already have 3 drivers now, and we might have other more and more add-ons being added into the cluster, or EBS, or EKS in specific, so that we might need to start thinking of like a thorough add-on management story.
Yeah,
potentially some open source project can help driving this effort. To me, the add-on operator seems a really good starting point.
Thank you. I hope so. I think the nice thing about the add-on operators is that fundamentally we're saying that you're going to specify what you're doing in a YAML file. So if it turns out that you're not going to use operators at all, if you want to just directly install, like as the cluster API demo directly installed Calico, if it turns out you want to directly install those CSI drivers, that's fine. It's not a big change, right? You just directly embed the manifest instead of having an operator which installs the manifest. I think the key reason to introduce the operator, or a key reason to introduce the operator, is when the process of installation is a little bit more complicated than just a kubectl apply. And that might be the case for CSI. So yeah, please do join the meetings. We'd love to have you.
All right, probably we can bring up the discussion there too.
Great.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any other items for our agenda? Otherwise, I will say thank you very much to Nadir and to everyone else for joining, and see hopefully all of you in KubeCon EU. I think we will still have a meeting next Friday, because I presume not everyone will be traveling to Barcelona on that Friday. I might be, so I'm hoping Nishi can do it. I think Nishi also volunteered to do a demo of Pulumi next time. If there are other people that want to do demos, as Nadir did such a great job today, please do sign up, and otherwise see everyone in 2 weeks or 2 and a bit weeks. Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.